Hey guys, I'm Sam Crack, and today I want to talk to you about structure because structure is one of the most important things when buying a salvage car for rebuilding. Most of the times, these cars are salvaged out specifically because they have a problem with their structure. As you see up front, this blue section here, these are basically your front frame and your front frame rails. And that's where the engine sits, in between the two front frame rails, and then your apron are the sides directly underneath the edges of your hood. So that is kind of the first thing to get hit in an accident. Now let me show you this clip of a Kia Soul that has its front bumper removed and the hood's up so you can see exactly what I'm referring to. Starting with at the front, this crash support, which is this beam that goes from here to here. And it mounts in, see those bolts? It mounts into, if you look real closely, back here is white. You see that white paint? That's a frame rail. That frame rail runs all the way back. Oh, sorry, Mario.
No.
Okay, okay.
No problema.
Okay. And so it runs all the way back to the firewall of the car. You can't see it because there's a lot of things in the way here. But, and you see here, this one is a little bit better. You see where that condenser line is down here. The frame runs all the way back and runs into the firewall of the car. That motor mount right there that's actually supporting the motor usually bolts onto the frame. So, let's go take a look from another angle here. So this is the front structure of your car. In a nutshell, they're all basically the same. That front support with rails that run all the way back. In an accident, front end accident, this crash support is supposed to take the brunt of the damage. Now, in a more severe accident, that damage will transfer to those frame rails, and it can move them. It can actually move them one way or another, like I'll show you in this picture of my Fiesta. All right, so here's my Fiesta ST before it was rebuilt. Now this is after I've stripped basically the whole front end off. The crash bar was completely destroyed. It had actually cracked in the accident. And the radiator and core support, which sits behind the crash support, that was all destroyed. So this is all the bad parts off the car, and you can see here on my front end, my frame rails are completely bent towards the passenger side. Now these were actually kind of an interesting scenario. When frame rails get kinked completely, make something like a 90-degree angle and actually bind in the middle, they're basically unusable and the structure is highly compromised. Now in this photo, these frame rails were shifted, I'd say about a good 40 degrees to the passenger side, if not a little bit more. Believe it or not, they were able to be repaired. And in some accidents where the car was hit straight on, and it was hit straight on very hard, the crash support will actually kind of bind and make a V in the middle. And what that will do is pull the frame rails in a little bit. And in my case, as you can see from the way these frame rails are bent, the car was obviously hit from the driver's side pushed towards the passenger side by another car. Here's a better image of the frame rails completely shifted. And since that crash bar is holding them together, when that car hit my Fiesta, it pushed them over like this. And that'll give you a good idea of what can happen to frame rails in an accident. Now in this case, this is more extensive damage than some other items you'll typically see. And one interesting thing to note is anytime there's a dent in your structure, in the actual frame of the car, the unibody that we're discussing, this here, that's considered frame damage. And sometimes that's a great car to buy. You could have a car like my Audi S3 and it had a lot of quarter panel damage as far as cosmetic wise. And if there's just a little bend or a little dent right here in this area, that's considered frame damage, and that adds substantially to the cost. If you were going to go and cut this entire section out, let's say, and replace it with one from the factory, that adds a substantial amount to the repair costs, and again, the car will get totaled out. But if you can live with knowing there's a little bend in your frame, it's not a big deal. Now, bends and things of that nature can be repaired with small hand tools all the way up to a big machine that actually has like a claw on the end of it and pulls out, stretches back out the structure into the shape it was before. And again, it's finished up using just hand tools, a hammer in your hand typically. The machines are very sophisticated nowadays. It used to be that people would measure manually. Obviously, people make mistakes. Some of the more sophisticated machines now have lasers and sensors in them. They'll actually measure where your frame is at, and it will pull the car back in exact manufacturer spec. So the computer software tells it the entire spec of the car in every single area, and then the machine will pull it out, which is pretty incredible technology. But that's the sort of things that modern higher-end collision shops use today. Obviously, the most common accidents are front-end collision, but also what happens frequently is people that get rear-ended. So let me show you this clip of this S-Class that has the rear bumper off so you can see the structure of it. So here's a last generation S-Class, and its rear bumper is off. So I'm going to show you the rear structure of a car. And so again, very similar to the front, where you have a crash support, that long bar that runs across, and then that crash support mounts to two areas on the back. Now most cars are like this as well. See, it's got the black metal that you see here mounts to basically the unibody of the car. And in a rear end accident, your bumper has a piece of styrofoam. Depending on how harsh the impact is in the accident, that styrofoam's going to take a little bit of the impact, and then it's going to push in to your bar right here, and hopefully it stops right there. It might twist these black pieces up a little bit, but those are easily replaceable. It's when you start to actually impact behind there, you see all this part of the unibody. It's when you start to impact the unibody, you can start to crush and break all sorts of things. So in the trunk is obviously trunk lining. You see right here, there's carpeting, there's light, that's where the light plugs in, the tail light. Right here is a vent to let any sort of moisture out of the car. All that stuff can just get crushed in a really hard rear end accident. Same thing in the front end. You go past that crash support, you're going to crush everything in its way. Now, as we see, the front end is a lot more hollow than the rear, and that's because an engine and a lot of things need to go there. In the rear, like you saw, you have that crash support. Past that, you do start to run into everything that's in the trunk. So if you hit any tail lights, then you start to hit whatever is on the inside. So a more basic car might just have some lining and carpeting. A more fancy car like that Mercedes will have some really nice plastics, and there's a lot of wiring for a lot of different motors in the higher end cars. So you can start to experience a lot of damage. And now when we're just talking about the frame, when it pushes in like that, a machine can be used to kind of pull out the car back to its original form, or the car is usually just totaled. Now that we've talked about those two sides, we can focus on our A, B, and C pillar. So the A pillar is the first pillar. It's right near your head if you're the driver. The B pillar is what's in between the front and the rear doors in a four-door sedan. And the C pillar is this one that where the rear seat passengers would sit, would be next to their head. So on this Audi, here's the A pillar, here's the B pillar, and here's the C pillar. Behind just the body is the structure of the car. If you get a ding in your A pillar, a lot of times a ding can just be, either pulled out or it will be filled and painted. If it's a severe hit on the side of the car, a lot of times they'll cut the actual skin off the pillar. Now, if it's damaged further, that gets into the unibody. When it gets back into this unibody, it all depends on how severe the hit is, and again, whether or not it'll be safe and suitable if a machine pulls it out, or whether you can buy, a lot of times you can just buy one piece like this B pillar here, the actual structure, and weld it in place. Otherwise, if it's severely hit and it not only trashed the B pillar, but the whole floor of the car and things of that nature in a really hard T-bone style accident, Well, a lot of times, again, they'll total the car and it will likely just be used for parts because it just becomes a very big headache. You can generally buy most, if not all, of these structural pieces on most makes and models, and you can buy, of course, all the body pieces. It all just depends on how much of a hassle it becomes to rebuild it. So if you see a car at the auction and it has a minor little dent in the structure, that won't affect you. You can sometimes even leave it as is, and it's not a big deal. That's why in some of these fluke cases where you see a car that might just have a little dent in the structure and gets labeled as frame damage, those are some of the best cars to buy. Now we'll take a quick look at body on frame. So as you see on this truck, this is a Chevy Silverado, you have the bottom frame, the part in black, and then you have the rest of the body sitting on top of it. Everything else for this pickup truck kind of goes along with what we've said. However, on the pickup truck, the bed is all separate than the cabin. There's still frame rails on the front part of this frame here. Everything can be repaired or replaced, and it's just all dependent on how severe it is. I just thought it's important, since we're talking structure, for you guys to know the difference between body on frame and unibody. So I hope you enjoyed the quick education on structure and the overview of really front and rear collision damage. So I'm back here in front of the sandwich truck. I hope you really enjoyed this video on structure. It made me think of a lot of other things, and actually one other thing a lot of people don't talk about is the differences in structure. Technologies have advanced quite a bit, and a lot of the newer structures are using different steels. So I'm going to do a quick video on that so you guys understand that actually all steel and all structures are not created equally, and it adds a little bit of time. And when you add time, it always adds cost in repairing these cars. So I'll do that very soon. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it, and it helps me out. And please be subscribed. Also, if you guys ever have any questions, hit me in the comment section below. One day I hope to be able to do a live stream with you and answer any questions you have. Take care. We'll see you next time.